There is a deep geopolitical connection between the United States and that part of the world. What is the role of U.S. politicians in all of this?
James Baldwin wrote about how Israel was created as an extension of United States policy to be a colonial entity at the gates of the Middle East and to function essentially as a military base out there and as a means of extending its policy, throughout the Middle East. And it has functioned as such. The United States is not an honest peace broker. It never has been an honest peace broker. The United States has never shown any meaningful inclination towards peace, has guarded and protected Israel from international accountability, has made Israel invincible. The United States is not just responsible at the governmental level for the genocide. It's responsible for letting it get to this point in the first place. We have funded that arsenal. We've given them the most sophisticated weapons in the world to test on the most desperate population in the world. We've given them the weapons. It's been bipartisan. We have issued at most inconsequential statements of condemnation, but at the same time stopped any international body of law from actually holding it accountable. So the United States at this point, unfortunately, has rightfully lost all credibility. It should remove itself from this because it is not an honest peace broker. I think Americans are probably sick of us paying for wars in general. I think Americans are probably sick of our tax dollars going to funding a genocide while we have a rise of homelessness and income disparity here in the United States. I think that Americans probably don't like that we're making ourselves so deeply unpopular in the world because of Israel's actions. So in the immediate moment, make this stop. The United States could have had a ceasefire a long time ago. The United States could have ended this genocide right away. The reason why this is continuing is because of U.S. foreign policy. And in the process of Joe Biden talking about managing this crisis and talking about making things better, there have only been more bills that have come out of Congress. In fact, he's bypassed Congress to fund the arsenal, to keep replenishing the arsenal. Stop paying for weapons. Stop paying for someone else's war crimes. Stop protecting another country as it commits these war crimes. And if you can't be an honest peace broker, get out of the process.
So there's money that you just mentioned and bills, and then there's rhetoric, which you also criticized, that he spoke about the beheaded babies and things of that nature. So where has Joe Biden fallen short?
We need another podcast. That's going to take a few hours to talk about where Joe Biden has failed. For one, the first time he seemed to find the word Palestinian in his vocabulary was when he accused the Palestinians of lying about the death toll in Gaza. And then that turned out to also be false. In fact, the numbers that were coming out of the Gaza Health Ministry, according to multiple international bodies, have been underreporting Palestinian casualty counts. Israeli intelligence has said that the civilian count or the death toll is actually higher than what's been coming out of the Gaza Health Ministry. So he's failed on that front. He has failed to speak to Palestinian humanity. He has spoken with deep passion and concern, as has Anthony Blinken, about, the devastation in Israel and the way that people are feeling in Israel, and has shown nothing of that sort towards Palestinians. We don't want the rhetoric. We really don't want the rhetoric. When people say, call for a ceasefire, the United States has had an opportunity and has an opportunity to really walk back and reflect on its entire policy towards Israel-Palestine. This is a moment of reflection. This is a moment of restoration, if you want it to be, right? And to think about what we've enabled in the first place. He's shown absolutely no real empathy. And I think that he is under great delusion in thinking that the Muslim community or people of conscience are going to forgive this, are going to forget this come November. You can't tell us that, well, at least I don't have the Trump Muslim ban while also carrying out a genocide primarily against Muslims and think that the Muslims are still going to vote for you. And so we will make him hear us at the polls. And any politician, for Congress or otherwise, that has not called for a ceasefire, that has been a part of this dehumanization, we will make sure that we see support for them in any way as a community. It's only right.
So Biden has lost or is losing the hearts and the support of the Muslim, Palestinian people and the Muslim people in America.
I don't know if he ever had the hearts of the Muslim community, to be honest with you. I mean, I personally was never a Joe Biden fan. I think a lot of people felt the same. You know, this country, unfortunately, leads to the way that our political system is built is that you're always voting for the lesser of the two evils. That's always the way that it is. It's analyzing which evil is lesser, right?
Yeah.
And when people say, if you vote for Donald Trump, and I'm not planning to vote for Donald Trump either, but if you don't vote for Joe Biden, right? If you don't vote for Joe Biden, right? Then you are destroying democracy. I'm like, a democracy that's given us a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is already a failed democracy. And so he never had the hearts and minds of the Muslim community. People always saw past his rhetoric. He always has had a terrible disposition towards Palestine. He's always had a terrible disposition towards the Muslim world. You know, his segregationist past comes out sometimes when he starts talking about the Muslim world, and you can hear the racism in his voice, and you can hear the way that he talks about Palestinian life in such devalued fashion. So he lost us a long time ago, but he's definitely not getting us back after this in any way. And I can't speak for all Muslims, but I think that come November, he and all of those politicians, especially in swing states, that have turned their backs on the Muslim community, and not just the Muslim community, by the way, 67% of this country wants a ceasefire. 3/4 of Democratic voters want a ceasefire. Half of Republican voters want a ceasefire, right? It's not just the Muslim community. This is not some radical opinion to call for a ceasefire. And every single politician that has refused to hear us is going to pay a price at the polls, as they should. That doesn't mean that we're under any illusion that the other side promises us anything better. In fact, it feels like Republicans have simply rushed to out-racist the Democrats, to outpace them in terms of talking about how they're going to be more unapologetic in supporting Israel unconditionally, right? Like it's been pathetic. But something has to change. And I think that Americans of conscience have to look at how this failed political system has hurt people here and abroad, and talk about how to transcend that with just more humanity. Again, when you have 67% of the American public that wants a ceasefire, but only a handful of congressmen out of over 500 can muster up the courage in the face of these super PACs to say that, you know, we should stop the genocide, right? And like, what are you asking for here? You're asking for the genocide to stop. You're asking for Israeli hostages to be brought home. You're asking for Palestinian prisoners to be released. You're asking for peace and to start carving the path out to end this once and for all, right? In the most ambiguous way possible, by the way, because there aren't many radical American politicians, right? It's the way that the system is. In the most ambiguous, bare way possible. And you can't even bring yourself to do that. This is already a failed democracy then. All the while, again, you know, it always boggles my mind. If you're from the America First crew, what's America First about funneling billions and billions and billions of dollars to Israel while it carries out this genocide, while people are starving here? And if you're part of the human rights crew and, you know, progressive crew, it's, you know, they have a term called Progressive Except Palestine, right? PEP, Progressive Except Palestine. Where are all your notions of social justice? You talk about policing here, but you don't talk about who trains our police departments in many major cities and the type of brutality that's being carried out there. You talk about human rights at the border here, but you don't talk about the assault on people at the border there. You talk about all of these things here, but you somehow use the exact same framings against the people there. So it's exposed I think the moral bankruptcy of both political polar opposites that exist in this country right now, and hopefully evoked a greater societal sentiment to say this is ridiculous. You know, one of the things that is happening is that more people are getting their news outside of legacy media outlets. You can't hide that many dead babies anymore. You just can't. More people have woken up to the Palestinian plight now than ever before. More people are outraged that this has been our American foreign policy all throughout, Democratic and Republican administrations. This is what we've been paying for. This is what we've been excusing. And Israeli leaders literally spit in the faces of whoever the American president is and says, yeah, we don't care what they tell us to do. American leadership says we're pushing Israel to minimize the casualties, to get less indiscriminate with its bombing, to manage the crisis, get a few more humanitarian corridors in, to make sure that Gaza is not evacuated and not ethnically cleansed, to make sure Palestinians can come back. And Netanyahu comes on TV and says, from the river to the sea. How ironic is that? From the river to the sea. And that is his policy. We're going to make sure that Israel controls from the river to the sea, and we're going to push Palestinians into Sinai, and Muslim countries need to take them in. You have Israeli ministers, national defense ministers, saying, things openly, right? Like, we want to thin out the population, i.e. ethnic cleansing. We want to remove people. And the Muslim world needs to step up and take in these refugees, right? And the American administration, or the American president says, and American Secretary of State says, we're talking to them and we're making sure that that's not going to happen. And if one of their ministers says something, Blinken maybe tweets out something about how that's not going to happen, but then it happens anyway. And then we still write them the checks. So I think most of the American public is probably going to get sick of this at some point. And just people of decency and people of conscience are going to say, yeah, this is not something we want to be a part of anymore.
Do you think there's something that Donald Trump can do to help move this in the right direction?
Trump's first words were about how he's going to be worse on this, right? So he talked about how he's going to deport people, revoke visas of, students that are part of these pro-Palestinian rallies.
Also, the focus was on the rallies versus what's going on abroad.
Yeah, but look, we had a Donald Trump presidency. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He was not better on this. Unfortunately, this is a bipartisan problem. And so, again, we're under no illusion here. Like, we're not looking to Donald Trump as a savior here, but we are going to penalize Joe Biden. And that's, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that that's where a lot of our minds are at right now.